Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining into this webinar. My name is Yasir. I'm a senior technical support engineer in Fronius, Australia. I've been working as a part of technical support team for about 2.5 years now. Welcome all. With me joining Chris today. Hey, Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Chris. I've been working for about 2.5 years at Fronius as a tech support engineer as well. And yeah, we'll be going through our best practice recommendations for connecting the inverters to your network.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, let's get started. So this is a brief overview of what we will be discussing today. Of course, we'll start off with why the PV system monitoring is necessary, how to set up it, and we'll have a quick overview of the internet network components and some relevant things related to the network components, which is here firewalls, range extenders, and mesh networks. Then we will show you briefly how to connect Fronius inverters via LAN or Wi-Fi. I'm pretty sure most of the people are already aware about it, but I will just give you a brief overview anyway. Then Chris will provide you some insights and troubleshooting the connectivity issues and why various network settings. And finally, we'll conclude with a live demonstration of connecting the internet to Fronius Gen 24 network. Fronius Gen 24 inverter. All right, so why do we need to set up PV system monitoring? We all know real-time information is very important to ensure system operates optimally. We can plan our energy consumption throughout the day, depending on what the production is. Of course, minimizing the downtime by regular checkups of service messages, if there are any, and doing the software updates on the inverter. How we can make it possible? Of course, by setting up the inverters to the internet and make sure that the service messages and the error codes are monitored periodically, and which allows us, of course, as a technical support, if you contact us, to respond in a minimum time possible to your queries, or if there are any inefficiencies detected in the system. Finally, you can generate the data, or you can, from the past, let's say if the inverter is installed 6 months ago, you can monitor it against the estimates provided by your installer and take the decision of expanding the system, or if you want to add a battery storage system to an existing installation. All right, so this is a basic diagram for an internet network. You will find this set up in a residential setting mostly. So on the right hand side, you can see the router. The solid line represents LAN connection, and the dotted lines is a Wi-Fi. And this system, or this network, is protected by a firewall. So this slide gives you some advanced overview of the network. You can see the additional components here is a switch. On the right hand side is access point. You can also refer to them as mesh nodes or mesh router network. And of course, firewall will be common here. This is a setup you will find in large organization or commercial systems or commercial sites. Firewalls. So what is a firewall? We'll just define it quickly. It's a set of security rules that monitors traffic to and from your network, and it allows or blocks traffic, the data exchange based on some rules that are put by either your internet service provider or the IT administration if it's a commercial facility. The information here you can see in the boxes are some rules that needs to be activated to ensure the historical information and the real-time information gets transferred through successfully to the Solar Web server. more information about these ports and rules, you can get it from Fronius Download Center. This is the website address, or you can just write it on the Google to go into the Fronius Download Center, and once you are there, you can just type in firewall change logs. All right, something about range extender. So we'll not be covering in detail. As mentioned before, we'll have a quick overview in terms of what is most relevant to the topic. As the name implies, range extender is basically a repeater or boosting the signal of the main Wi-Fi router. And it does that by creating another network. It's something to be mindful of. And it can be plug and play type, or like an automatic setup, or in some cases you may need to configure the extender to make sure that a correct router is selected, or the extension of the router is correctly configured. This is an example of mostly used range extenders. About the installation, so you need to make sure that the extender is installed between the router and your device you want to connect to the internet. So this is an example of what you don't have to do to make sure the extender is in the middle or midway between the router and the inverter. That way the signals get detected in like in a proper manner. Otherwise, in the previous, if you do that, or even with the mesh networks, which I will explain it later, you need to make sure that the coverage is as per the main router position. All right, so mesh systems, it's relatively a new technology, and it's a slightly different topology to what the extender works on. So in mesh networks, you can see each nodes makes up, like there are multiple nodes that makes up a system, and compared to the range extender, which is just basically extending the Wi-Fi or just boosting or repeating the signals. While in mesh, each node can dynamically choose between other nodes, depending on which is faster or which is available at the time. On the right-hand side is an example of mostly used mesh networks. All right. With every technology, you probably know that have limitations. I'll be discussing limitations just in regards to topic. So the inverters is a part of IoT structure, or you can say an inverter is an IoT device. What is an IoT device? It's a device where there is a data exchange taking place at regular intervals. So complexity and latency is the main thing here to be mindful of. It's not like you cannot use the mesh network system with IoT devices. You can definitely use it, but you just have to be mindful of its spatial requirements that it comes with, or networking protocols. Something about latency, just have to be mindful of, because the data is getting exchanged with the server very frequently. So the mesh network's ability to hop between the nodes and to find the fastest possible node for the data communication, this may take some time, and the data may lose, or you can find your system like the real-time monitoring mostly showing offline status. This is not with just the inverters. You can also find these challenges if you're installing a mesh network in automation or security systems. All right, so this part I'm pretty sure most of the viewers are already aware about, but we'll go through and with a view of how we think it should be done, or if there are any points missing, then you can take notes of. All right, so for SnapINverters, to connect the Wi-Fi, we go into setup menu, then choose the Wi-Fi access point, and then activate the Wi-Fi access point by pressing the enter button. Here you will see the password is already mentioned, which is 123456778. Most of the installers and customers know it, but in upcoming data managers or inverter, you may find the password is different for security reasoning. So make sure you, if the password is not working, it may be that the inverter is part of a new stock where the password is changed with respect to each device. All right, so this is what you get after activating the Wi-Fi access point, either on your phone or a tablet. You turn on the Wi-Fi and you will see a network with the Fronius and data logger ID. Followed by, you can also use Solar Start app. It's mostly for installers, or you can just jump to the website, inverter website, which is 192.168.250.181. Once you enter, you may be getting either of these screens, depending on if the inverter was set up for monitoring before or not. So let's say if it's a new installation, you will see a window on the left where you have to choose Solar Web Visit and follow the prompts. If the inverter was already been set up for monitoring, then you will see a screen like on the right hand side. And let's say if you're changing a network, like after change of an internet service provider, you want to change the network, then you will be clicking on settings on the right hand side page. All right, so once we click on the network, you will see different options. So make sure the connection mode is chosen correctly. If it's via WLAN or Wi-Fi, you make sure it is connected or it is selected to WLAN. If it's LAN, make sure it's connected to LAN. You don't need to activate the local network by access point, so make sure you don't activate it. It's not required, or it's not the part of connectivity to the internet. We don't need to change anything in the LAN settings because we are doing the Wi-Fi. So we go down in the available networks list, make sure our network is available there, and the Wi-Fi signal strength should be at least 2 bars and not fluctuating. You select the network, press set, and then enter the password. And then afterwards, you can hit the tick up top on the right-hand side, and then inverter will start, or the data manager will start connection attempt. Once it's done, you may be asked to reconnect to the inverter to be able to see the system information on the right-hand side of the web interface. Here, if you see the globe symbol has turned green, that means it's the Solar Web connection is established. If it's red and you see the IP address in the below WLAN or LAN settings accordingly, then there should be something preventing the connection to Solar Web server. So usually that means you have a firewall in effect here. All right, Wi-Fi connection on Gen 24s. So slightly different way to open the access point. You touch the sensor in the middle just once and wait for the light on the right hand side to start flashing blue. Once it's active, you will find the network on the tablet, laptop, or your phone. The password, you will get it on the label on the Gen 24. So just make sure what I have told you before. It may change for each device and in future. You can also scan it here directly and it will take you to the web interface. Otherwise, you can also use 192.168.250.181. Once you have entered that IP address, so before moving on, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows here to turn off your mobile data when you're trying to access the interface. Otherwise, it will not show up the web interface if your mobile data is active. So it's for both Gen 24 inverters and SnapINverters. Make sure you turn off your mobile data before accessing the web interface IP address. Okay, so as soon as you enter the IP address for Gen 24 inverters, you will see a side menu. if you are not able to see it, so make sure you click on 3 parallel lines there. Probably it's not shown here, but you will find it there once you jump onto the interface. On the left-hand side menu, go to communication. So the important point here is the customer password. So that password is what installers set up during the commissioning. So this password is not the SolarWeb password, or it isn't something that is created by a technical support department or whoever, or any from Fronius. So that has to be mentioned to the end customer before leaving the site. And again, this customer or the technician password is generated during the system commissioning. All right, so once you are in, select networks, and you will see something like this. So you select the Wi-Fi network, among the options you see there, choose your network and put the password in. So that's the default setting. We don't change the automatic to static. Make sure there's a host name. Chris will provide some insights about this in future slides. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. So you press connect and you will find the system on the SolarWeb portal if everything goes smoothly. All right, so LAN connection, nothing much to do here. Instead of choosing WLAN, you just select connection mode as internet via LAN. Make sure if it's dynamic or if it's a commercial site, you may be provided with static IP address, gateway, and DNS. So for in residential settings, you won't need to set a static IP in most cases. Chris will go over the static IP as well in the future slides. All right, so in Gen 24, you will see the screen on the right-hand side. Make sure it's selected automatic and press connect. Okay, this is a very good option for residential customers if they don't want to go through all those above steps, and they have the WPS function and on their routers. Mostly all the routers have the WPS function. So what you need to do is just press the sensor of the Gen 24 twice. The Wi-Fi access point sensor in the middle, you can see it there. There's a finger. Tap it twice and you will see the right-hand side LED start flashing green. And then you can go to your router and press the WPS button. Something to be mindful of here is it can go like the other way. You can you may need to activate or press the WPS function on your router first, and then come to the inverter and tap on the sensor twice. It may take up to 2 to 3 minutes, and when the light goes solid blue on the right hand side, that means the connection has been established. For those who doesn't know, WPS means Wi-Fi protected setup, or in other words, it's appearing without any intervention with the inverter. All right, here starts troubleshooting. I'll hand it over to Chris to provide some insights. Here you go, Chris.
Awesome, thank you, Yasir. All right, we'll start with troubleshooting. So the first stage of this is for the SnapINverter. So you mentioned earlier about the system information page. There's quite a few points on this page which can help us diagnose what the actual issue is. So the first one I'd point to is the top row, which has the data logger ID. You just want to make sure that this is correct with what you're adding to on SolarWeb. That's not, say, missing a digit or a digit is incorrect. The other one would be the LED states. So we've got the tick and the cross. If those are red at all, I would recommend to contact the installer or Fronius support. The globe LED is the next one. Green is good. Red is disconnected from the internet. And gray just means that you've got an incorrect setting on another page, which I'll touch on shortly. And then the IP address. So you can see here if an IP address has been set. If you've set a static IP directly on the inverter interface, then what you're going to see is an IP in that area. Otherwise, if what most people would do, connect it dynamically, where the router will assign the IP. you'll be able to see what IP has been assigned in that box there. One scenario where you might have a firewall issue is where that globe LED would be red, but you'd see an IP. That just means that the inverter's being blocked somewhere at the router and not getting all the way through. All right, so the Fronius SolarWeb page here, so this is under settings and then Fronius SolarWeb. There's one setting here, send data to Fronius SolarWeb, and if that's set to no, that's when you get a gray globe LED, and you just need to flick that to yes, and then click the tick at the top of the page. The bottom section refers to the archive data, which on SolarWeb, that's basically just the graph data. So you just want to make sure that's sent hourly. That's on by default. The Gen 24, so the first thing we look for on the Gen 24 is what the LEDs are doing, if the inverter is dropped offline or if it's not connecting. So you'd focus on the right-hand side LED, which is the network connection side. Solid blue is connected locally to the network, solid red disconnected. Flashing blue just means you can access the network, access the inverter, sorry, via its local Wi-Fi access point. So jump in, change any settings you need to. And flashing green just means WPS mode is active, which is a very good option if you don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of connecting to the inverter and changing any settings there. Okay, so restarting the inverter is another good starting point, I think, for any piece of technology. If you're running into any issues, you can try a restart. With the inverters, you turn off the AC first. So you'll have two forms that might be possible on your site. So you could have a solar supply main switch or an inverter supply main switch that would be in your switchboard. Alternatively, there might be an AC isolator right next to the inverter, which will be labeled as well. Then you'd want to turn the DC off. If you have a SnapINverter, so the one with the screen on it, the isolator is just underneath it, and you need to turn that to face towards a 0. And then if it's a Gen 24, the isolator is on the front, again turning towards a 0. You could wait a little while, just make sure all the lights are off. And recommended wait time is about 3 minutes or so, just to make sure everything's fully discharged. Then you can turn the system back on, so DC on first, so flicking that back towards the 1, and then AC back on after that. If the inverter comes back online, once that's happened, we'd recommend going onto SolarWeb and just running a remote update. So updating the software through there. You can access it through solarweb.com. Just on your site there, go to settings, and then components. You can select your component at the top under the data sources section, and then click on update. If you're updating a SnapINverter, the data manager card in the SnapINverter, that'll take about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're updating a Gen 24, that'll take about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, some other issues that might come up is the incorrect host name. So the first thing about host names is they need to be unique. So let's say you're installing an inverter on a site and the site's owner is named John. If you name the inverter John, you might run into an issue because the owner might have another device on his network that is also called John. So we just recommend making sure it's unique by entering the serial number as a host name. It's a good way to make sure that you don't run into any clashes there. Cool, the DNS and the gateway. So just a brief explanation of what they are. So the gateway, you could think of it like a road between two cities. It's how everything's going to travel, so an entry and an exit point for the network. And the DNS is like a translator, and that will translate something like solarweb.com to an IP that can be used by the router. So commonly what you'd see, we've got a screenshot in the bottom left from the Gen 24 settings. So commonly what you'd see is the gateway and the DNS is just the IP of the router. On more advanced networks, you might see different addresses there, but most common is just the address of the router, and the router just handles everything for you. So you can double check that with the IP address, usually just checking the first 3 points of that IP consistent and the same. So 192.168.2, that example. If the DNS was set to something like 192.168.1, then you would run into issues there. Okay, The Gen24 has a really good page under the communication tab called Internet Services. So this is where we run all our tests on the network. And if anything fails, then it'll come up with a big red cross and it'll tell you what's failed. So on the left here, it shows you the tests that have run. So there's 3 main tests and the last one has failed, and it shows the exact reason why it's failed. So a specific address at port 443 can't be reached. That could be something like port 443 is blocked, that address is blocked, something to do with the firewall. But if that does occur, then at the bottom of the menu, which you can see in the bottom right of that right-hand side screenshot, there's a link that will take you to our website, which should explain the causes and possible solutions for when you've failed one of those tests and what's going on there. Okay, setting static IPs. So this is something you'd come across more at commercial sites or sites where you have a more advanced network. We always recommend, if you are setting a static IP, to set it directly on the router, although the inverters do have the capability for you to set a static IP directly on them. So I've got a screenshot from a router here on the left. It shows the client list, so this will be all the devices connected to the network. And you can see it has assigned IP that they've been assigned as well, so that's just automatically done by the router. At the bottom of that screenshot, it has the address reservation, which is where we're setting a static IP. So we've picked a MAC address, which is basically just one of the devices on that network. We'll reserve the IP address or set it to a static IP so that whenever that device connects to our network, it's always going to connect with that IP that ends in .1.114. Likewise, on the right-hand side, we have a screenshot from the Gen24 menu where we've set a static IP in similar fashion. The reason that I wouldn't recommend doing it directly on the Gen24 menu is because you can run into clashes or issues later down the line. So if, for whatever reason, another IP is assigned to .1.114 and you also have that set on the inverter, you're going to have an IP clash there and the inverter might drop out. Likewise, if you were to exchange the router, you might have a different DNS and Gateway and IP for the router and whatnot, and then you're going to run into issues there. So if you do set a static IP, it would always be on the router. Band steering. So band steering takes advantage of the fact that we have 2 main network frequencies that are used, so 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And what it does is, instead of making 2 separate networks, so one for each, so one for 2.4 and one for 5, it runs both at the same time under the one network name. So the issues that you might run into here is if this is on, the device, or the Fronius device, might not connect to it because it's only compatible with 2.4 gigahertz networks. With band steering, it'll try to direct the devices to 5 gigahertz where possible. So we just recommend that going into your router settings and disabling band steering. So there's a screenshot just on the right, just showing what it might look like in your router settings. Okay, some general tips and just a summary as well. So if you are connecting to a Wi-Fi or a LAN really, we'd recommend just testing it first on your device, especially in the case of like a range extender or something like that, just making sure you're getting proper internet through that range extender or network. You can test it on like a laptop or a mobile or whatever. If you were doing, say, a LAN connection, then I'd recommend taking the cable out of the inverter, plugging it straight into a laptop and testing through there. You can also try pinging Google, so like 8.8.8.8 via the network on site. Would always recommend using a LAN connection where possible. There's lots and lots that can go wrong with Wi-Fi, especially over time as well, and LAN usually trumps those. When connecting LAN on Gen24, there's 2 ports, and you should always use the LAN 1 port. Like I just said, if setting a static IP, this is preferred to be done on the router. Band steering recommended to be off, just using 2.4 gigahertz networks, and making sure that you're not connecting to an open network. So if there is a network on site that doesn't have a password, it's not going to be usable by the Fronius product. So there needs to be a password for that network, and then you can use the inverter with that one. Awesome. All right, just three more things. We had the, so if you are to contact support and just forward the inquiry to us, then we would need a few things, or we're going to ask for. So if you could get these ready beforehand, that'd be fantastic. So SnapInverters, just screenshots of those 3 pages. So under settings and network, settings and Fronius SolarWeb, and then system information. That'll tell us a lot of information, and hopefully we can get it resolved very quickly. For Gen 24, we would need 2 screenshots. So one of the internet services page and then one of the network page. And then for both of them, what we'd need is some information from the network on site. So what are you using? Are you using any range extenders, a mesh system? What type of router, distances, LED colors, all of that. That'll really help us get to know, what the site is like, what we're dealing with. And with those screenshots, we should hopefully be able to pinpoint the issue with you. Awesome. Okay, now we'll get into the demo.
All right. So this is what we do on Gen 24. You activate the access point, like I mentioned before. When this light starts flashing blue on the right-hand side, that means the Wi-Fi access point is active. And then you go in your Wi-Fi settings on your phone or laptop or a tablet device, and then enter the IP address. So as soon as you enter the IP address, you will get this dashboard, and you will see a login option there on the right-hand side. You can click directly on communication. You can see it's logged here. That will require customer password. So I'll just put, let's say, customer 123. Right. So we are logged in as customer now, and then it allows us to select network. Select network here on the left menu. Since it's a simulator website, so you will see the Ethernet is already connected, so don't get confused. It's a good point to show you that it's either or network that needs to be connected at a time. So it's either LAN or the Wi-Fi. So if you're using both, then that's not recommended. Let's say we are doing a Wi-Fi connection setup. So we connect, we want to connect Wi-Fi, click on the Wi-Fi drop-down menu. We'll see the list of available networks. In some cases, if the signal strength is not so good, you may be able to press refresh, and then it will load with the new or your the network you want to connect to. Let's say we want to connect to .com there. Select the network, put the password in. Like Chris mentioned, we can put the host name there. Let's say it's inverter serial number. So make sure we identify the inverter. If there are more than 1 inverters that needs to be connected. In normal settings, we are using automatic IP, and then press connect. It'll take some time, and we'll give you a message, something like this. Reconnection with the monitoring, reconnecting with the monitoring system now, and it will give you an option to either stay connected, like if you want to use the Wi-Fi access point, you can always refresh and jump onto the inverter IP address, make sure the Wi-Fi access point is still active, which means the blue light should be flashing. Or if you want to connect to the inverter portal via your internet connection, then you can jump onto the IP of the inverter, that you can see it from the router settings. That's more complicated. What I would recommend is just using the IP address of the inverter. That's pretty much it. It's very simple for the Gen 24 inverters. I'm not sure how people think about the SnapINverters, but yeah, here it is. All right then, so we'll move on to the questions. Who has got the first question? I can see there are some questions coming in.
Might start with this one. If there are any errors in Gen 24, how can we tell, as there's no screen? So we'd really recommend having monitoring for the system. If there are any errors, then they get emailed straight to you. And likewise, you'd also see on the inverter, the left side LED is power light, so that'll tell you the state of the inverter's in. Usually it's green if it's good. If you're in error, then you'll have a red LED as well.
Okay, there's a question from Jackson James. If inverter was previously connected using WLAN, can we still connect with WPS? Yes, definitely you can. If you have changed the internet service provider, or your internet service provider has changed the router, and it comes with a different password, then you can use the WPS function. That's correct. Okay, there is another question. This is from Jackson James as well. If we, for some reason, don't know the password, is there any way to reset the password? Yes, definitely there is. We would recommend contacting your installers, because they have the tool. It's called Fronius Solar SOS tool. They can generate a recovery key once you have provided them the challenge pin that you will be able to get after clicking on the forgot password link. The other way is, if your inverter is online, then you can request the recovery key from SolarWeb website. So you just need to go into settings, and then your components, and you will see that option on the right hand side. If you have any questions, or if you want to know further, you can always send us an email and we'll guide you through.
Cool. Question about the inverter simulator that we're using. Unfortunately, no, we cannot share that one. That's just for internal use at the moment. We've also got another one about doing a fan test on the Gen 24, and that's not possible locally, but however, we can run it through remote access as long as we have that one.
Okay, there's a question from Gavin O'Donnell. It's not relevant to this topic, but I'll just try to answer it quickly. So you get an error 20101 when you're trying to log into SOS app. So first thing you need to make sure is you have an installer account, and your email is registered on SolarWeb. If that's done already, then I would recommend using another browser, or clear the cache or the browsing data of your browser and try again. If you have any questions, just feel free to send us an email, and we'll get in touch with you.
All right, we've got some others here. So response time that prevents communication when using Wi-Fi repeaters over long distances. There's not a specific limit for it, but you always want to make sure that what you're repeating is a strong signal. If it's not a strong signal, you might get a strong signal from the repeater itself, but if your initial signal isn't very strong, what the repeater is sending back to the router is not going to be very good. So might have to look into how strong that signal is. But we'd be able to, usually we can pull some sort of file from the inverter, or you might be able to help us with pulling some sort of file from the inverter, so you can see what type of signal strength we're using, when it's dropping out, and why it's dropping out. But that would need to be escalated through Fronius support. All right, I think we're right on time now. We might wrap it up there. If we haven't got to your question, we do apologize. We'll get to it in the background. This webinar should be emailed out sometime tomorrow as well for your recordings. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.